This one is called Eldritch. This is a short section from the story. And I'm going to read it. When observed, the Eldritch changes. Once its characteristics and tendencies are documented, it adopts new characteristics, new tendencies. A researcher observes that the Eldritch propels itself by means of long, translucent flagella. The researcher writes, flagella, comma, translucent, means of locomotion. But as soon as he returns his attention to the Eldritch, he finds that it now propels itself by means of a slight undulation of its belly. The flagella, now bright orange, are being used to expel waste. The researcher makes a note of this, and then finds that the Eldritch in question is suddenly stationary. Its flagella have disappeared altogether. It will most likely be surprising to you that the scientific community has no idea how the Eldritch is able to accomplish such dramatic mutations. However, keep in mind that the mechanics of an ant walking along the vein of a leaf is enough to make all the technological advancements of the last 3 centuries look like the output of an 8th grade woodshop. Wobbling tables, misspelled signs, precarious rocking horses, unevenly stained. Human achievement and understanding are constantly being dwarfed by the complexity of the natural world. So how do scientists address this question of the Eldritch's ability to alter itself? We step around it, nodding politely as we pass. As a scientist, it is often the only acceptable method to ignore an impossible question, which, if history serves, will most likely be answered accidentally, by someone setting out to answer something else. Rather, most research regarding the Eldritch is concerned not with how it changes itself, but why. Because if one accepts the assertion that the first priority of all living organisms is self-preservation, then one must conclude that the Eldritch's very existence serves as an argument that there is something caustic in being identified, in having the boundaries of one's physical and behavioral makeup established. In fact, this seems almost intuitive. Once the characteristics of a creature are fixed, it is given a role to fill as a result of those characteristics. Through the act of being itself, either creature becomes the one forced to attach itself as a parasite to a lower intestine, where it will depend on that organ for the most foul sustenance imaginable, or else it becomes the one whose lower intestine is thus infested. Certainly, neither position can be said to inspire envy, but because each creature allows itself to be itself, both positions are unavoidable. The evolutionary adaptations that creatures undergo in order to alleviate their circumstances are, at best, only half solutions, and at worst, further provocations of hardship. The haunch muscles that aid the antelope in its flight from predators are also an excellent source of protein. The bear's massive strength portrays its equally massive capacity to starve to death. But while other creatures change themselves in response to the environmental pressures that affect their various roles, the Eldritch seems to change in order to shun the notion that it has a role to fill in the first place. Furthermore, the Eldritch does not depend on a Punnett square in order to carry these changes out. Instead, it changes instantly. So in the exact moment that one creature is just beginning to realize, after hundreds of thousands of years of genetic alterations, that an elongated snout is not nearly as useful as perhaps its ancestors had supposed, the Eldritch is growing 24 snouts per minute, stretching them out farther and farther. Just as quickly, the Eldritch allows its snouts to fall off and desiccate. Though, before we regard the Eldritch's position as being totally advantageous, it should also be mentioned that, on account of its compulsive tendency to change, the Eldritch misses out on one of the most pleasing aspects of being a creature, which is, simply put, being a creature. Among all living things, there's a certain joy in being recognizable as oneself. Even those of us whose bodies are a constant source of apprehension and awkwardness take comfort in seeing our faces in the mirror at the end of the day. As young scientists, you are all, no doubt, very unattractive. Yet there is something reassuring in knowing that you've taken a shape, however unfortunate. It is something that is utterly yours, and no matter how miserable you might look in your underwear, or while standing in a bathing suit, when you're being honest with yourself, you enjoy your shape. You take solace in it. Think. When people feel dejected and forlorn, they often hold their own head in their hands. Why do they do this if not to take consolation in the fact that they have a definite form, that they are in the possession of something entirely their own? This notion that all creatures possess inalienable qualities which represent an incorruptible sense of self exists on an evolutionary scale as well. Just look at the transformation of dinosaurs into birds. The dinosaur might not mind diminishing in size or growing wings, but to stop laying eggs, to begin shaping its skeleton differently or its heart, to give up the beautifully vacant eyes of a reptile, the savage waggle of its neck, unthinkable. That is why researchers are now attempting to determine if, in all the eldritch responses to the observations directed at it, there are any qualities that refuse to change and are quintessentially itself. A common approach is to have a live video feed of an eldritch's magnified image broadcast onto a large monitor, where it is then viewed by a room filled with observers, all of whom stare intently at the image and direct as many observations at it as possible. The manic and prolonged ripple of changes that this exercise produces in the eldritch is recorded for posterity and then viewed repeatedly by researchers attempting to establish some sort of constant in the eldritch. The hope is that if a great enough number of observations is directed at a single eldritch for a long enough period of time, the creature will eventually become overwhelmed and begin to falter, inadvertently revealing its secret consistencies. No such breakthrough has occurred. As the number of observations directed at an eldritch increase, so does the eldritch's ambiguity. On a monitor in an observation room, an eldritch takes on a series of indescribable shapes, splits itself in two, reabsorbs itself, becomes bright pink. It trembles slightly and then explodes. It reassembles itself, explodes. One must admit that even the meekest creature ends up seeming bold in comparison. Consider the gazelle. There is an unmistakable bravery in its implicit admission that, through being a gazelle, it is a gazelle. And even though one can hardly look at its long, delicate neck without immediately thinking of the powerful jaws that will inevitably snap it in two, the gazelle does not shirk its post. It manages to take responsibility for what it is, while the eldritch can only change unconditionally, a slave to its wild, untouchable freedom. Thanks a lot.